What's up guys and welcome back to Moaning. If you guys are new here, then what is up? My name is Erica. Hey, how you doing? And if you're into the history of the ancient Greeks and the Romans, maybe you're just into the mythology, and maybe you're just here to hear about the end of Homer's Odyssey, which is insane to me. Well, then this is not only the video for you, this is also the channel for you. You guys are going to want to hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you know every single time I post in the future. But on topic of today's video, and as I just ruined it for you because you guys can read the title and I just said it, we're going to be going into book 24 of Homer's Odyssey. So if I could summarize book 24 into a one sentence, it would just be that Odysseus finally reunites with his dad. Obviously, the most important thing is that it is the last chapter of the Odyssey. That's clearly the most important thing about this book. But the main storyline that we're going to be focusing on is Odysseus reuniting with Laertes, his dad, because he's really the last person of importance who has to know even that Odysseus is home after 20 years away. So this is going to be a very cute moment. It is a very heartwarming moment for both characters. So in saying that, why don't we just roll into the narrative? So where I left you in the last book was Odysseus actually leaving the palace to go and talk to Laertes, and he tells Penelope, he's just like, bye, gotta go talk to my dad. Penelope's like, all right, sweet, have a good time. And Odysseus leaves with Telemachus, the swineherd and the cowherd, right? So the four of them leave, and this book doesn't actually pick up right on that line, which is a little bit weird because we're kind of used to Homer doing that, specifically with big storylines like this. However, where we do pick up the story is actually with Hermes. So Hermes, for those of you guys who don't know, Hermes is the messenger god. He, I think, popped up very briefly in the Iliad, and he doesn't really pop up in the Odyssey all that much, aside from to really tell Circe the whole plan in book 10. But aside from that, he's not a very big godly character in either of these epics. But what you should know is that one of Hermes' roles as the messenger god is that he's also a shepherd for souls, for bringing them from the world of the living down to the underworld. Contrary to popular belief, gods cannot just hop between, Olympus and the underworld and do it willy-nilly. Like, gods don't do that. Only Hermes is a god who does that. So he is the one who we snap to, and he's bringing the souls of the suitors down from the palace of Ithaca through the fields of asphodel in the underworld. As the souls are walking through the fields of asphodel, we see that there are the souls of Achilles, Patroclus, Big Ajax, and Antilochus that are all sort of hanging out on the side, and they're seeing this whole long line of these young men who really shouldn't be dead, and they're just like, what the is going on over here? But before any of them can actually say anything, the soul of Agamemnon walks over to them, because Agamemnon has his own posse of people that he hangs out with in the underworld, right? So a lot of them hang out together, like just with Achilles and that whole gang. They're still friends, but Agamemnon has his friends who are also people that were killed by Aegisthus. And so occasionally he comes over and he talks to the heroes of the Trojan War, but he mainly sticks with them, right? We also saw this in book 11, when Agamemnon comes up separately than Achilles and all of them. Anyway, so in this moment, he hops over to go and talk to Achilles. As he approaches, Achilles is actually the first one to talk to him, which is not what anybody would expect, but it happens. He says to Agamemnon that once upon a time, all of the heroes of Troy did think that Agamemnon was favored by Zeus because he was the leader of the army. However, they then found out that he was not, because he had a terrible death, and if only he had died on the fields of Troy like the rest of them, then he would have been able to pass down this great lineage and this great social standing, right, to Orestes, that he would have been able to be like this great hero commander who died on the fields of Troy instead of the man that got killed in the tub by his wife, right? That's like not as good of a title. And so Agamemnon replies to this by telling Achilles that he should feel really lucky that he actually died on the fields of Troy. And then he goes into this whole spiel of what happened after Achilles actually died at Troy, which we obviously don't get in the Iliad because Achilles doesn't die in the Iliad. So we get this really nice description of what happened there, where Agamemnon tells us about how everybody was like wailing, that he was honored like a god, even in life and in death he was honored like this god. And his mother, oh my goodness, Thetis's reaction was just like so over the top. It was actually kind of wild. She gets all of the other sea nymphs to cry as well. Like, Agamemnon goes through every single step and even tells us that the whole Greek camp actually mourned for 17 days when Achilles' body was brought back to the Greek camp. 17 days! And it wasn't until the 18th day that actually they decided to then burn him, after they had done all these funeral games and all this sort of stuff. They burn him and they take all of the bones and they put it with the bones of Patroclus in this two-handed urn thing, right, that was given to Thetis by Dionysus, and so they were put together and that's where they were buried. And he does make a note, actually, Agamemnon does make a note here, where he says that the bones of Antilochus were actually not included in this burial, not because Antilochus didn't mean a lot to Achilles, because we know that when Patroclus died, that actually Achilles loved Antilochus as the second person in the camp that he liked the most, basically. But Antilochus was not included in this cute little burial between Patroclus and Achilles. And so we hear all of that from Agamemnon, and as he's saying, you were honored like a god then, you're honored like a god now, you're so lucky for dying in the fields of Troy, not like me, which this is literally not about Agamemnon right now. He's talking about Achilles, and he has to just do a whole 360 being like, what about me? And then he finishes it by saying, I have no happiness in death because I was killed by Aegisthus and my crazy wife. After Agamemnon has finished his little spiel, the men then trade stories. It doesn't go into specifics in this moment, by the way, but we know that they were all chit-chatting as the souls of the suitors are walking past them until it gets to Amphimedon. And that sort of stops Agamemnon dead because he knows Amphimedon. So he sees this soul and he's just like, hold the phone 1 second, guys. And he walks over to Amphimedon and he says, look, okay, you probably don't remember who I am. That's totally fine. I did meet you 21 years ago. And then he goes on to explain that the reason why he knows Amphimedon is actually because when him and Menelaus needed to convince Odysseus to take part in the Trojan War, they actually stayed with Amphimedon on Ithaca, because obviously Odysseus was like, you can go yourselves, I'm not going to war for 20 years. Well, I'm not going to war in general. He didn't know it was going to be for 10 years and then he would have to have a 10-year journey home. But Odysseus initially said no, and we find out now that Agamemnon, it actually took him a month to convince Odysseus to go to war with them. And during that period, he stayed with Amphimedon and his family. And so even though Agamemnon is like, you probably don't remember me, but here's exactly why you might remember me. This is what I was doing, all of this sort of stuff. But I have a question. Why are all of you down here? You all look far too young to be down here. You would have been a great army. You would have been a great ship crew. He even says that no man could have gone out to pick a better crew than these men in front of him. So he's like, what the happened and why are you all down here? Amphimedon does actually remember who Agamemnon is and does tell him, of course I remember you. Oh my goodness, of course. That was such a long time ago, but it was a great time. We had some fun, didn't we? And then he explains, I kid you the not, he explains the entire Odyssey to us. Everything. He explains what the suitors did. He explains Odysseus coming back. He explains the whole beggar incident. He explains the whole Penelope weaving incident. We get the whole story summed up by Amphimedon in the underworld to Agamemnon. And last time I did do this for the Iliad, and people have told me that they haven't read the rest of the book and only gone to read this because I told everybody the line numbers. And so I'm not doing that this time because I do want you guys to read the whole book. But just that you do know, the last chapter of the book, there's a little part in it where Amphimedon does summarize the whole effing story and does it quite well, I have to say. Props to him. Anywho, though, he does end this by saying the worst part of the story is that all of their family and their friends don't actually know that any of the suitors are dead because they're all still in the palace. Their bodies are still in the palace. And so he says it's worse because they can't be mourned, they can't be buried, they can't be honored. And Agamemnon, this is actually quite funny because Agamemnon hangs on to only one part of this whole summary. You would think maybe he hung up to the suitors being rude. Maybe he hung on to the fact that Odysseus did come home. Maybe he hung on to some other part of the story. Whatever happens to be this great hero's journey. Agamemnon does not care about any of this shit. And all he does is focus on the fact that Penelope was loyal to Odysseus the whole time. He literally calls Odysseus a mastermind for choosing a wife like Penelope and says she was so loyal, she didn't forget the man that she married, she came up with all of these tricks to get you off her back because she honored the man that she had given her life to and she had been married to and all this sort of stuff. Not like my wife! You can't even make this shit up. He literally just goes on this rampage, slating Clytemnestra, just being like, she's this, she's that, she's ruined the whole woman name for every other woman to be born in the future. He's so overly dramatic in this moment, and you're just reading it dude, I get it. I get that you were killed by your wife, but let it go. You're already dead. And actually, something that I do want to pass on to you that I actually heard at a chat by Natalie Haynes the other week I went to, and she said a really interesting part about this specific speech, where she says that Agamemnon probably, in the mythological time frame of things, probably only met Penelope 3 times in his entire life, right? So he probably met her when he was going to go and court Helen with Menelaus, probably met her then. He probably met her when he went to Ithaca to go and get Odysseus to go to Troy, and then maybe he met her one other time, right? Let's just say that maybe at Odysseus' wedding or something like that, maybe he was there. Okay, so he's met this woman 3 times in his entire life, and he holds her to the utmost standard, which is kind of wild when you think about it, that maybe it's just because of her reputation as being this really loyal wife. Maybe he's just comparing her to Clytemnestra, and it's just any woman that doesn't kill their husband did a good job, or didn't cause a war. You know, he doesn't particularly like Helen either. So like, maybe that's it. He's just like, Penelope just sits at home and does nothing, which is kind of wild either way, that like, he's holding Penelope to this crazy high standard, though he's probably said 5 sentences to her in his entire life. It was just one of those things that when Natalie Haynes pointed it out in a talk, I was just like, she's got a point. I see it. Anyways, though, back to the story. In the underworld, Homer tells us that the men just sort of continue to trade stories between them and the suitors and the Battle of Troy and all of this, whatever. And then the narrative snaps to Odysseus, and he actually goes to speak to his dad. So him, the cowherd, the swineherd, and Telemachus show up on the farm that Laertes has been staying at, right? And Laertes has been tending and all of this. And when they get there, before they've gotten onto the grounds even, when they get there, Odysseus tells the 3 of them to go inside to get some food together, and he alone is going to go and test Laertes and going to test his father to see if he can recognize his son after 20 years, which I think is a little bit rude. This man has gone through so much loss over the last 20 years, including his wife, Anticlea, right, who we met with the Underworld episode, right? So we met his mother, Odysseus' mother, then. And so we know that literally Laertes has no one. Like, he probably hasn't seen Telemachus in a while, because we know from Eumaeus that Laertes hasn't even been going down to town because of all the suitors and all this. Anyways, so I think it's rude that Odysseus wants to test his dad, but he does it anyways because it's Homer and it's the Odyssey. So the 3 men go inside, and Odysseus approaches where he can kind of see Laertes as like tending to some, you know, shrubbery bush thing on the farm, right? So he walks over to him, and we get this description of Laertes who's bent over, and he's covered in rags, right? He is like not looking so good. He's covered in rags, and he has all this like gardening gear on, basically, right? He's got like gloves, and he's got sort of like mask on and all this sort of stuff. And Homer tells you know the gloves are because there are thorns and all this. That's why I know it's gardening gear. He just describes it much fancier than just calling it exactly what I did. So Odysseus approaches, and actually when he gets a proper look at his dad, he realizes just how rough he's looking, and genuinely doesn't know if he's actually going to test Laertes, because he doesn't know if it's right to do so, because he looks so rough. And obviously he then, even though he has this like internal debate in the moment, he does decide he still has to test his dad just to see if he's going to recognize him after 20 years and really know his son from a faker. And so he walks up to Laertes, basically like taps him on the shoulder, and he's just like, hello, sorry to interrupt your work, I got a question. He first of all asks Laertes if he's actually on Ithaca, because he makes up this thing where like he had walked down the road, he had come into contact with somebody, asked if he was on Ithaca, and the guy was kind of rude to him. So he's double checking with Laertes if he actually is on Ithaca, because he has this long lost friend that he wants to see. So that's why he wants to know if he's on Ithaca, because he's come to Ithaca, or going to Ithaca, to go and see him. But he also says to Laertes that he doesn't actually look like, he doesn't have the stature of a servant or a slave, of somebody who should be working in the fields. So he then asks, you know, who are you and what's your background? You know, why are you out in the fields when you clearly don't look like somebody who should be out in the fields? And lastly, he does the most typical Odysseus thing, where he goes, do you want to hear the story about my long lost friend? Don't worry, I'll tell you anyways, take a seat. Like, how Laertes doesn't know that this is Odysseus is shocking, because no one else speaks like this, where like, that alone you should be like, oh, that's definitely my son, he won't stop talking. But Laertes doesn't do that, obviously. Odysseus launches into the story of his long lost friend. We get the whole description of it, and again, it's all obviously made up because he's talking about meeting himself, right? So the long lost friend is Odysseus, if you didn't get that from before when I did these things. So he then sort of, you know, recounts this whole time where he met this Odysseus and all of this. And Laertes then steps in when it's his time, and he first of all says, you are in Ithaca, don't worry, you're in the right place. However, this sort of guest that you want to talk to, this old guest friend of yours, this long lost friend of yours, he sounds just like my son. So when was the last time that you saw him? Like, when was the last time that you saw this man? When did you host him? And then he finishes off by asking him where Odysseus himself is from. Well, not knowing that it's Odysseus, but he says, where are you from? You know, it's your background, and wants to know really a lot of detail about how he knows Odysseus, without Odysseus having used Odysseus' name. That sounds really confusing. Without Odysseus pretending not to be Odysseus, talking about his long lost friend, he doesn't use the name Odysseus to describe his long lost friend. But Laertes can obviously put 2 and 2 together, because Laertes isn't stupid. Odysseus then starts telling yet another lie. And I honestly cannot even keep track of it, but at this point, he is now a Sicilian man. And he saw Odysseus actually 5 years ago when he had been on his way home. And so they had sort of agreed that they were going to meet up then in Ithaca at some point later, and Odysseus would, you know, have him in his home as a guest. And so that's why he's there on Ithaca right now. Now, unfortunately, this does not get the reaction that Odysseus would have hoped from Laertes, kind of, but also like it goes a little bit too far, because Laertes, you guys, Laertes goes into full-on meltdown mode. Genuinely, like Achilles level. Like, he actually does the same thing that Achilles does in book 18 of the Iliad when he finds out that Patroclus has died. Laertes does that right now, okay? So that means that he drops to his knees, he claws at the earth, he pours it over him, and he's wailing up to the heavens about Odysseus because he's just like, my son! And this obviously makes Odysseus, who's watching this, feel really bad about testing his dad. He's just like, this is totally backfired. Did not intend this to happen. And so Odysseus does just kind of like attack his dad in this like massive bear hug, and he starts like kissing him and hugging him and being like, I'm so sorry, that was me testing you. I am Odysseus, I am your son. I'm finally home from 20 years away. Trying to get Laertes to calm down, and obviously Laertes is sort of like wiping away tears and like trying to calm his voice, and it's like, are you really my son? How do I know if I can trust you? Because bear in mind, Odysseus just told him that he was a Sicilian man and made up this whole story. So obviously Laertes isn't just going to switch over to being like, oh yeah, you're my son, clearly. Meaning that Odysseus does what he's done this whole time, where, you know, he lifts up his leg and he's like, I can prove to you that I'm Odysseus, and he shows off his scar and he explains exactly how he got the scar, which again has been reiterated like what I feel like is 4 times now in the book. We have heard the story of the stupid scar, but alas, we have to go into it again. And then the two of them actually have some history on that sort of like little farmstead that Laertes is on, and so there are all of these trees that Laertes had gotten for Odysseus as a boy, and like things that he had done as a boy on this plot of land. And so he recounts all of these individual stories, which obviously convinces Laertes, and Laertes is like overwhelmed. Like, this man is so happy. Like, he is literally like hugging his son. He's just like, oh my god, my baby's home, this is amazing. He's so excited that he faints briefly. I kid you the not. He actually has this moment where Homer's just like, he then just sort of like died. He was so excited. And then he comes back to life and he like praises Zeus that his son is home. However, once he's done having his like, you know, good little time with Odysseus, he then does turn to him and he says that he worries about when everybody finds out about the suitors, because Odysseus in this little moment had also said like, by the way, I killed the suitors, good news. So he does worry about that, and Odysseus is like, look, don't even worry about that right now. I told Telemachus and the swineherd and the cowherd to go inside and to cook us some food, so we're gonna go in and enjoy that first, and then we will handle the whole suitors avenging thing and possibly coming to kill me, whatever. We'll do that after we eat. Which Laertes says okay, and then they walk over to the hut. They all go inside. They have this like little reunion. It's like really cute, and then everybody sits down to eat in the hut. Then we have one of the main hands on the farm, and his 6 sons show up after like a whole day of work, right? So they walk in and they see everybody sitting around the table, and obviously they know everybody aside from Odysseus, which they then, you know, clock that it's probably Odysseus, and they have this moment of being like, oh my gosh, the king is back. And so they then go and they like hug him, and they have this like cute little reunion, and Odysseus is like, yeah, sit down, let's all just like have some more food and let's just like celebrate. And so then they make some more food and they all sit down, and now we've got like all of them cramped around this table, like having like a merry old time, which obviously doesn't last too long. And that's because rumor decides to do its thing. So rumor now sweeps through the towns of Ithaca, and all of the men start hearing about the slaughter of the suitors, and you know, they all open up their door and they're just like, what has been going on? Why does that smell kind of fishy? All of the men sort of get together and they go back to the palace, where they start wailing outside. And when they're let into the palace, they see all of the bodies of their brothers, their sons, their cousins, whatever relation it is. They see all of them on the floor, bloody and unburied, and they're just like crying their eyes out. They then everybody drags the appropriate body back to their home. They then dress the bodies. They, you know, do all of the normal funeral stuff for them, bury their bodies, all of this. They then wail, they mourn, all of this, whatever. We get a very long description of all of that, because now all of them are mad that they know Odysseus is home, and Odysseus has killed all of the best princes of Ithaca, which is questionable based on their reaction, but that's what they believe nonetheless. So what do? They do exactly what the men of Ithaca do best, and they hold an assembly. And who leads the assembly? You probably wouldn't have guessed it, but I'm going to tell you anyways. Antinous' dad gets up and he leads the assembly, and he basically says to all of them, very long story short, because he does have a little moment up on this little pedestal to talk to everybody, but he says, Odysseus has killed all of our sons and all of our princes, and we must avenge them, and we must kill him. He says that he would much rather die than see Odysseus try to escape, because that's sort of what he thinks, that Odysseus is going to take the other people who helped him kill all of the sons, and they're going to leave to a different island to try and escape their wrath, basically. And obviously all the other suitors' parents and brothers and cousins and whatever hearing this are just like, yeah, let's kill him. Now we have Medon and Phemius show up though, and Medon actually walks over and he stands up to talk in front of them, and Phemius is still close to him, because now they're like a little double act, because they're the only 2 who survived this whole slaughter. But because they were there, Medon gets up and he says, look, I was there, I saw this whole thing happen, and it wasn't just Odysseus, it wasn't just mortals. that actually a god was on their side, and a god was in the form of Mentor and fought with them against all of your sons and helped him kill them. And this gets Halitherses, who is a character that I mentioned in the Telemachy, and I didn't really know how to say it, and I just had to decide myself, by the way, because no Greek person corrected me. You will correct me on a lot of things, but Halitherses is not one of them. Anyways, he gets up to speak now, and he says to all of the suitors that now all of their children are dead because it's their fault, because he had said in the beginning books that they really had to sort of curb all of this behavior, that the suitors were acting out of hand, and that it was their job to tell them to cut it out. And because they didn't, now they're all dead. And so therefore, because now they know that a god was on Odysseus' side, he tells everybody in this meeting it was clearly willed by the gods, and therefore you shouldn't be trying to kill Odysseus because the gods probably won't allow that either if they were on his side for the whole death of the suitors thing. Only a very small portion of the suitors' parents actually react to this, and the rest of them just get riled back up in order to want to kill Odysseus. And that's really what they settle on. They all settle on avenging the killer of their children and their cousins and their brothers. And so, you know, there's safety in numbers, and so everybody just decides, well, I guess we're doing that. And off they go to find Odysseus. Before we get to Odysseus encountering all of, you know, the Avengers and everything, we cut to Athena, who's speaking to Zeus. And the first thing that she says to him is she pleads to him and she says, how long will you make this go on for, this suffering of Odysseus? Hasn't he suffered enough? And Zeus replies, what are you talking about? This was your idea. You're the one who wanted him to come home and to kill all the suitors. So, like, I don't know how you thought this was going to end when you came up with this brilliant plan, Athena, because again, you asked me to ensure that this happened. I'm just acting out your will, which is a totally valid point from Zeus, I gotta say. He's done this like 2 times in total. He did it once in the Iliad as well, where he basically told everybody else like he was just acting out what they had asked him to do. Now he's doing the same thing to Athena, and he does end by reassuring her and saying that Odysseus will not die, that he will go on to live a very long life, and he will die in his old age and all of this, after a very long reign of Ithaca. This encourages Athena enough to calm down, to stop wailing, and she then, you know, off from Olympus and goes back down to Ithaca. So now we're back with everybody in the same scene because Odysseus and the men are all eating. This is where we cut to. We cut to the hut where they're all eating, or the farmstead where they're all eating. And one of Dolius's, who's the farmhand's sons, he goes to the door because Odysseus is like, we should probably check if any of them are coming to, you know, come and kill me and all of this. And so he then opens the door. He sees this mass of people approaching the farmstead, and he just sort of closes the door and turns around and goes, ah, we're in trouble. So everybody gets armored up, right? Every single person in this scene. We've got the 6 sons of Dolius, we've got Dolius, we've got, you know, the 2 herders, we've then got Laertes, we've got Odysseus, we've got Telemachus. They all put all their armor on. They then have all of their spears in hand and their swords in hand and everything, and they open the little farmstead door and they walk out to go and meet this long line of avenging people, army thing. I didn't think of that sentence very well, but you get what I mean. Athena then comes down in the form of Mentor, and she stands next to Odysseus, and obviously this totally comforts him because he knows that it's Athena. And so he then turns to Telemachus in the other side of him, and he says, hey boy, by the way, you're about to learn something, and that is not to disgrace our family line because we're all very good warriors, so now is your time to shine and to prove yourself. And obviously Telemachus turns to him and goes, Daddy-o, when have I ever disgraced you in battle? Laertes then pipes up from next to them, and he just starts wailing at the gods and asking for all of them to have mercy on them and to be on their side and all of this, which obviously Athena, as Mentor, leans forward, clicks in his face, and is just like, hello, you might want to be praying to Zeus and to Athena because that will probably help you out more, aka pray to me. Who the fuck are you praying to if it's not me? Athena now breathes life into Laertes, and this encourages him to pick up his spear, and he lobs it at this long line of avenging people in front of him. And the spear lands right in the forehead of Antinous' dad, right? And Antinous' dad is wearing a helmet, but it goes through the helmet, and this man just goes whoop, crashes back dead. Odysseus and Telemachus now take this as their cue to then run in to all of the men, and in fact, we're told by Homer that they would have killed every last one of them with their swords and with their weapons had not Athena decided, like, okay, this has gone on for far too long, too many bodies are on the floor. Now, Athena wants to put a stop to this because even though Zeus had promised that regardless of how many people died, he would wipe the memory of everybody in Ithaca of the suitors dying and of the avenging people dying in general. He said that, you know, they won't remember this for the rest of time and all of this throughout the rest of Odysseus' reign. So, you know, no harm, no foul type of thing. That even though he said that, she's decided that too many people are already dead and she wants them to stop. And so right now, she stands in between the 2 sides, the 2 armies, and she just basically says, hey, pack it in. She tells them all to make peace, and she does it in this really low, harsh, bellowing voice of Mentor, and in fact, it scares the living bejesus out of everybody. Like, both sides are just like, okay, Mentor is not here to play. Everybody but Odysseus, obviously, he cannot get enough of this whole like rush that he's feeling right now, and in fact, he tries to rush back against the suitors' parents avenging people and all of this to try and get more of a kill. And Zeus in this moment sends down this lightning bolt, and it lands right at Athena's feet. And so Athena turns around to him, obviously again still in the form of Mentor, and is like, no, I just told you not to do that. Do not play with Zeus right now. Do not play with me right now. Just stop. Make peace. And so after seeing this whole lightning bolt thing and seeing how serious Athena is, Odysseus does actually listen to her, and it's just like, okay, cool. And Athena passes out this whole peaceful pact between them, not physical. Obviously, I just did it as if she was like handing out papers to them. She's not. She's just telling them of the peaceful pact that they will make. And all the while, she's doing this still in the voice of Mentor, which again is where we get our modern interpretation of the word and being a mentor to somebody else, right? That comes from this whole character of Athena taking on the guise of this person and helping the Ithacans and helping Odysseus throughout this entire story. And that is the end of the Odyssey. What? I can't believe I just finished retelling the Odyssey on this channel for you guys. Like, that's actually kind of wild. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this series. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you guys have enjoyed this series, then please hit that like button. I've appreciated every single view, every single like, every single comment on all of these videos. It really does, like, genuinely, it brightens my day. Especially all the ones on the Odyssey videos and on the Iliad videos, because I do love these books and I love these epics, and I love that I can share that with you guys and I can help you guys read the stories or study for exams or whatever it is. It's just been a really wonderful experience, so thank you guys for allowing me to do that. So yeah, I guess next time I will be seeing you with Virgil's Aeneid, but until then, please have a good week, and we'll be seeing you next time with more ancient poetry here on Moaning. We'll see you then.